Is that good? Okay. I think it's okay. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Liza and I am 40 and pregnant with my third child. Today I just wanted to sit down and chat about the first trimester because I'm officially in the second trimester, so things are a little bit smoother sailing. And the first trimester was a little bit rocky. So we're going to talk about it. The rockiness had mostly to do with the fact that this is an unplanned pregnancy, so you don't have to worry. There's not too much horribleness in this video, although I am going to talk a little bit about miscarriages and eating disorders. So if that is not your bag, I understand. Click away. No worries. Oh, and by the way, this is going to be one of those like TMI videos too. So, again, if you don't want to hear kind of all the gory details, then feel free to click away. So my husband and I had been going back and forth for a little while about whether or not we wanted to have another child. We have two amazing kiddos, and for me personally, it was very much like it didn't feel like a no, but it didn't feel like a yes. Like I just wasn't sure. But I felt that way kind of about both of my pregnancies. Like it wasn't, I remember after I had my first child, a friend of mine was like, oh my gosh, did you just know? Were you just so ready? And I was like, girl, no. Like I always knew that I wanted to have kids, but I don't think you're ever ready to have kids. Does that make sense? I still don't feel ready. Almost a year and a half ago now, I woke up and was in a ton of pain. And wound up going to the emergency room. And long story short, I had an ovarian cyst that was 9 centimeters big. It was big. And it was causing ovarian torsion, which means it was twisting the ovary. That was what was causing all the pain. And after a lot of struggles with the current doctor and having to find a new doctor and another trip to the emergency room, that's a story for another time. I wound up having the cyst and my left ovary removed. So it was just a really tough decision. And I kept kind of joking that I wish that we had gotten accidentally pregnant during the pandemic, because then by this point we'd have like a toddler. Not that I think being pregnant during the pandemic would have been super fun, but it was more about the decision being made for me. And I guess be careful what you wish for. And then this summer, I had a whole bunch of things going on. I was in a show, like a live in-person on-stage show for honestly the first time since the pandemic. I'd done a lot of virtual theater over the pandemic, but hadn't been on stage properly in a very long time. It was my birthday, and we were also going on a big trip to Disney World, and it was all kind of in rapid succession. And for a while now, my periods had been kind of like, they'd just been getting unmanageable. I had been on birth control from when I was about 18 until I had my first child around 30. Part of the reason I was on birth control was so that I didn't have any babies, but also because it was managing my periods. My periods were very heavy, very crampy. They would last for 7 days. And on birth control, they were really well managed. After I had my kids, I didn't go back on birth control. It just, I don't know. I don't really know why, actually. I think I don't know. I didn't go back on the pill anyway. Hormonal birth control is what I'm talking about. So my periods had gone back to being very heavy, lasting for at least 7 days, if not a couple days longer. And there were always like 1 or 2 days where I was pretty much out of commission, like just in pain, heavily bleeding. Like it was awful. And I went to my gynecologist and asked to be put back on hormonal birth control, mostly because, like I said, I had all these things planned this summer and I didn't want to deal with having my period while those things were happening, or at least not having my period as horribly as I was having it. So I went in, and honestly, because I was a little bit older, I was thinking there would be some pushback, but he was like, no, it's no big deal. We'll just put you on, start you on the low dose birth control and see how that goes, and then we can adjust if we need to. I was like, great. And typically you would start your birth control the week of your period, essentially, because that's the beginning of your cycle. And I was kind of in the middle of my cycle at that point. But he said, go ahead, start the birth control. You can start it today. And then 2 weeks from now, you're protected as far as like pregnancy goes. And I was like, okay, great. So I started taking the birth control, and it honestly felt like kind of final. Like it felt like, okay, I'm getting on the birth control. Yes, it's for another reason, but it felt like decision made. Like we're probably not having any more kids. I kind of like made peace with it in a real way. The first month I was really encouraged because my period still lasted for about 10 days, but it was really, really light, and much more manageable and much more like I remember it being when I was on birth control before. So we love that. And then month 2 came around and my period was like a day late, maybe 2 days, but I think it was only a day. And it's funny because I have always been really regular. My periods have always been really regular, with a variation of 1 or 2 days essentially, but really like every month about 28 to 30 days. And every time that my period is kind of slightly late, my husband will kind of go like, oh, shouldn't you have started your period? I was like, yeah, but I kind of feel like maybe the birth control's messing with the cycle a little bit. That's probably what's going on. But we happened to have pregnancy tests. So I was like, I'll take one just to like alleviate, fears or whatever. And we'd gone to dinner. We went to see a movie. And I went upstairs to get ready for bed. And I was like, oh, right. I said I was going to take a pregnancy test. So let me take it. So this is at night. And I took the test. And when I tell you that line was so dark and appeared so quickly, and I just like, what's funny is that so I took the test, came up positive. My husband was downstairs. I went downstairs and I could not stop saying, what the f-? Like I just kept saying it over and over and over again because I was so taken aback. Like I could not believe it. I'm advanced maternal age. I'm down an ovary. I'm on birth control, and somehow I'm holding a positive pregnancy test. It's kind of funny actually because I have footage from that night so I took that test and then I was like to Mike, I was like, you have to go get me more tests. Like I don't believe maybe this is wrong. This is not real. So he went out to get me more tests and I just took a video of myself and holding up the test that I'd taken. And I was just like, I look so upset. It's late at night. So like my eyes are kind of bloodshot anyway, because it's like pretty late and I was like on my way to bed. And so I definitely looked like I was crying. I wasn't crying, but I look like I'm so upset. I just look so upset, which I feel bad, but I was in total shock. I could not believe it. So I call the doctor, I schedule my first appointment. And when you schedule that appointment, they ask you the first day of your last period, because that's how they base like how pregnant you are. And they schedule your first appointment for 8 weeks from the first day of your last period. Any sooner than that, and they're not going to be able to see anything on the ultrasound. So they scheduled it, and so they have in their books that I'm 8 weeks along. I know from knowing when we did the hippity dippity, that I'm more like 4 or 5 weeks along at that point. But you go in for the appointment and he does the scan, and it's just a confirmation appointment, which basically means that all they're doing at that appointment is confirming, 1, that the pregnancy is in the uterus where it should be, and 2, that the pregnancy is viable, which means, do they see a heartbeat? And he immediately confirmed that it was in the uterus. And he and I and my husband, we all saw, it looks like a little flicker. If you've never seen an ultrasound, it looks like a little flicker on the screen in the little like bean that is the embryo essentially. And we all saw the flicker, but then he couldn't really get it again. He couldn't get a good picture of it. So basically what he said is that I can't with certainty say that this is a viable pregnancy. So what we're going to do, just to make sure, is we're going to test your blood today, and then you're going to come back in 2 days and test again for HCG levels, which is the hormone that your body produces when you're pregnant. And if it's viable and everything's looking good, that number should increase. And if it's not increasing, or if it's staying stable, then this is probably not a viable pregnancy. So they did blood work that day, and then I was scheduled to come back in 2 days to do the blood work again and check my levels. And in that appointment, I asked the doctor, I said, oh, by the way, I'm supposed to fly to Disney World in a week. Is there anything that I need to be careful of? Is there anything with flying that I should look and, be careful of? Are there any rides that I shouldn't do? All that good stuff. His response to that was, well, I wouldn't want to have a miscarriage in Disney World. I was like, yeah, same. I don't want to do that. Mike finally went, hey, we're talking a lot about miscarriage. Is there a reason to be worried? And the doctor's response was kind of like, well, no, there's just more to talk about if it is a miscarriage than if it isn't. So that's why we're talking about it. And I see his point, but it was just a very strange conversation. And at that point, I kind of said, well, yeah, and just so you know, we're pretty sure we know the conception date, which would put me at about 4 or 5 weeks. And then he said, yeah, what I saw was about 4 or 5 weeks. After that, I noticed that I was spotting a little bit. And it never got to a point where it seemed like it was actually bad, like actually a problem. But it was pretty consistently spotting. So again, not the greatest feeling. Anyway, 2 days later, I went back for the second blood test. I was really hoping to be able to get the results before we went to Disney World, but obviously that did not happen. So we went to Disney. And kind of the whole time, I was really worried that I was having a miscarriage or I was going to have a miscarriage. It's hard to talk about both because it's hard to talk about in general, and also because now I feel much better and I feel really lucky. But at the time it was really, really stressful and scary. And, it's this weird thing where this baby was not planned, but is so, so, so wanted. So, getting emotional. Thanks, pregnancy hormones. Keep it together. Okay. Anyway, we did in general have a lovely time in Disney World. And while we were there, I did finally get a call from the doctor's office confirming that my HCG levels had gone up and everything looked good for now. So just wasn't getting the best vibes from that doctor's office. Was not feeling confident about going through a pregnancy journey there. So I immediately started looking for a different office and found some recommendations on the Facebook group for my town and for kind of the parents in my town, and had heard good things about this office. So I scheduled an appointment with them. I was very nervous, new doctor's office, and just not really knowing what was going on. But this doctor's office, the ultrasound tech is right upstairs. So I took the ultrasound, and she was lovely. She was like, everything's looking good. There's baby. The first thing she did was let me hear the heartbeat, which is just the most wonderful sound in the world. And then I went down, and the office that I'm working with now is really, really great. They kind of have a very choose your own adventure policy when it comes to your pregnancy and your birth plan, where they say, if you want to give birth in a hospital with a doctor and all of the drugs, we can do that for you. If you want to give birth at home in a pool with a doula, we can do that for you. They have a doula and a doctor and lactation consultant and a midwife all on staff. The office staff is so friendly and lovely. Like, everyone there is really lovely. I really, really like this office. So that was really refreshing and calming to really just like this office. So everything went pretty well at that first appointment. I got to talk to the midwife, and she said, "Oh, do you remember like what you can and can't eat and what you should avoid?" I was like, "You got to give me a refresher course because it's been 6 years since I was pregnant." So she went over everything with me, and everything was looking good. And they did the preliminary blood tests for all of the stuff. Those first blood tests come back, and everything looks good, except for my A1C levels, which is the indicator for diabetes. My A1C levels were pretty high already. Essentially, they just immediately diagnosed me with gestational diabetes. And that, on top of the fact that I am advanced maternal age, means that my pregnancy is considered high risk. So this office also works with specifically a high risk doctor. So I do ultrasounds and office visits with my regular OB. And then I also go to the high risk doctor to do kind of the more detailed ultrasounds. And they also manage the gestational diabetes. So I got the diagnosis of the gestational diabetes, which I didn't really know what it meant other than not good. They gave me the testing kit for blood sugar where you have to prick your finger, and they had me testing 4 times a day. So I test in the morning, which is the fasting number because it's you are sleeping, so you haven't eaten. And then I'm testing 2 hours after every single meal. And once they got some of those numbers in, then they started me on insulin. They scheduled me in to see the high-risk doctor, but first I had to meet with my regular doctor just to go over what it meant and all the kind of details of that. And so I go into this meeting, and it's the first time I'm meeting the doctor because last appointment I had met with the midwife. So this time I'm meeting the doctor for the first time. And he starts this meeting by saying, "Now, this is something that I would say to all of my patients in your position, but I just want you to keep in mind that termination is always an option." Now, again, in the spirit of trying to kind of understand where this doctor is coming from, I kind of assume that this is something that is in line with the office's kind of general idea. And they want to make sure that women know that they have a choice. And I love that. I think that's wonderful. It felt very jarring to start the conversation with that. So again, just a lot of not great talk in these first couple visits. Anyway, they scheduled me in with the high-risk doctor. I go to see the high-risk doctor. And that appointment starts with an ultrasound. And the ultrasound tech there is really lovely. Like, I love her. She's so great. Then the doctor comes in, and he was also really lovely. He just, again, confident, concise information, very straightforward. And he just was like, "Okay, the gestational diabetes, this happens all the time. We know how to deal with it. We're going to manage it. It's going to be fine. As long as you manage it, it's fine. As for everything else, baby looks great. Like, we could not ask for a better first ultrasound. Everything is looking right now as it should." And then he said, "Okay, so now you're going to go talk to our nutritionist about the diabetes thing." So I go and talk to the nutritionist. Again, a very, very nice person. But in this kind of preliminary meeting, it's just a lot of documentation thrown at you. And then you schedule a telehealth with the nutritionist one-on-one to really go over your own special needs and stuff like that. But at this first meeting, it was, here's a pamphlet with potential meal plans, what you should and should not eat, a lot of rules. And that was super duper triggering for me. I, for a lot of my life, have dealt with disordered eating disorder. And a lot of my personal brand of eating disorder is restrictive and rules and planning. And a lot of my kind of recovery of that has been about intuitive eating, and trying to be more in tune with my body and listening to what I'm craving and allowing myself to eat that. And here was someone saying, here are all the rules. And the thing that was really scary for me about that was the fact that it immediately came rushing back, the kind of like high of, I can get a gold star in this. If I do all this right, I can follow all the rules and I can be the best at this. And that was really, really scary. I'm in therapy. I have a wonderful therapist. It's all going to be okay. So yeah, for now, the diabetes is being managed and looking good, I guess. So then at about 12 weeks, it was time to do the NIPT, which is the non-invasive prenatal testing. And essentially it's a blood test that tests for kind of all of the scarier chromosomal possible abnormalities that could happen, including Down syndrome and trisomy, I think is what it's called. And it can also test for a couple of other genetic disorders as well. And when I was pregnant the last time, this kind of testing had just started happening. Like, it was pretty new. And with my last baby, they did the test at 12 weeks, and the first test came back, not enough fetal DNA. Essentially how it works, and I'm not a doctor, but I think how it works is they can detect trace amounts of the baby's DNA in the mother's blood, which is wild. I did it with my last pregnancy. They did it at 12 weeks, and it came back. The results were not enough fetal DNA. And my doctor was basically like, that could mean absolutely nothing. It could also mean that something is wrong. And I was like, cool. So he was like, let's do the testing again, and we'll see. They did the test again, same results, not enough fetal DNA. And at that point in my last pregnancy, they were kind of leaning towards me getting an amniocentesis. And I was not interested in that. So I said, can we try the blood test one more time and see what happens? And the doctors agreed. They did it one more time. Results came back. Everything looked good. So this time around, I warned my doctor of that and basically was like, just so you know, it took 3 tries last time. And so when the first test came back, not enough fetal DNA, I was not surprised. The doctor came to the same conclusion, was like, let's do the test again. So we're waiting for those results. And it was like later in the evening. And Mike and I host a podcast called DVD Deathmatch, where essentially we have 1,321 films on DVD. We pick 2 DVDs at random. We watch them. We talk about them. And then at the end of the podcast, we have to get rid of one of them. And for the month of October, we do like spooky season, where we take our collection down to just the horror films and only pick from those. So we were watching Psycho 2, I think. And it suddenly occurred to me that possibly the results, I hadn't heard from my doctor, but possibly the results would be in my portal. So I checked the portal, and sure enough, the results were there. And I'm scrolling through them, and everything is looking good. And then right at the bottom, it says something about like sex of the fetus. Because that's the other kind of fun thing with this blood test, is that if you want to, it's an earlier indicator of the sex of the baby, and it's more accurate because it is done via DNA. And so I'm looking at this, and then I just kind of go, oh, and Mike was like, what? And I was like, so we got the blood test results back, and everything looks good, and also, it's a girl? So that's how we found out. Now, we were planning to find out anyway, but it is kind of a very unceremonious way to find out the sex of your baby. P.S. And by the way, gender is a construct. It doesn't matter. We were not hoping for one over the other. And we would have been happy if it was a boy, and we are happy that it's a girl, and everything's wonderful. So yeah, so that was a very funny way to kind of close out the first trimester and lean into second trimester. We told the girls the next day, I think. We did kind of like a cute little reveal just for them. So yeah, kind of a funny way to close out the first trimester. Oh, as far as how I'm feeling, it hasn't been too bad, other than kind of all of the stress of everything that's been going on. I had a couple of weeks in the beginning where I would occasionally feel nauseous, but a lot of that had to do with whether or not I was remembering to eat. And as long as I, was kind of snacking consistently, lightly throughout the day, I was feeling totally fine, which as someone with pretty bad emetophobia, that was such a relief again. And oh my gosh, I was really, really, really tired. But also, is that because I'm old? Because I have 2 children already? Who can say? But I was very, very tired. Like, I'm not a nap person, really. But I was definitely taking some naps in that first trimester. Oh, and my boobs hurt. My boobs still hurt. But other than that, feeling pretty good. Second trimester. Crazy. I'm due in April, by the way. I'd say right now the only real feeling is like, I just want to be there. I want to have the baby already. And I don't want to deal with this kind of any more of the stressfulness. But again, we're at a point now where I'm feeling good. I'm feeling less tired. And also the past couple appointments at the doctor have been really wonderful. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. And I hope you're having an amazing day. Bye. Essentially, again, I'm not a doctor, but essentially, ooh, mosquito. Missed him. Dang it.